So I love this each and every Saturday. I get an opportunity to run through it. The last time you and I spoke, by the way, welcome into my home. I know normally you see craziness going on, crazy pictures, people yelling at me, hiding from the boss, whatever it may be. So welcome. And I figured I would welcome you into my home for a video or two and just hang with you like we all do. And normally, like regular circumstances, be human beings, I guess, for 10 minutes. But we'll see how that works because the plays have to hit. Speaking of which, last time you and I spoke, we went 4 for 5 on Thursday night football. So we're going to start things back up again. Hit that thumbs up button. Make sure you're subscribed here, of course, across the board to the Odd Shopper channel. We have a lot of things for you to take advantage of. Okay, so we're not going to go through a lot of stuff right now. We'll save that for after we start things. But as you know, right before we begin, we just if you want to crack your knuckles, if you want to just take a big breath, if you want to just go full stretch, that's fine there as well. All right, start the clock. 5 bets in 5 minutes. Here we go. Tyler Algier over 46.5 rushing yards. We want to target a Cincinnati Bengals defense that, since they lost a couple of guys on that front, have not looked good. So that's the difference here, is they have given up a ton of yards on the ground, including to New Orleans, over 200 yards last time out. Atlanta runs the football. Remember, that's what they do. That's their specialty, charging along here on the ground. So I really think that there's a great opportunity right away to open up with the Atlanta Falcons hammering that, especially with Algier, their top guy. I was tempted to go Marcus Mariota, but I think in this case, we're just going to keep it simple and take the running back to go over his prop. Would be shocked if he doesn't hit 60 based on how bad things have been. All right, we move on to the Packers game. This one here, Green Bay continuing to just mount pressure over and over again. Well, if you look at this really from the start, I think the Packers-Commanders game is an opportunity to take advantage of somebody who's going to be pressing. And the only way he can press is by throwing. And the fact that Aaron Rodgers, we're getting just north of 2-1 on a pick for Aaron Rodgers. Here's the key. The Commanders made a couple of key changes to their secondary. Everybody's focused on Taylor Heineke coming out here as the change at quarterback. They still suck on offense because their offensive coordinator is a joke and their offensive line is horrific. So Aaron Rodgers now is going up against the real change, which is the defensive backfield.
Unless Ben wants to keep talking about it.
No, we can talk about Bo Nix. we can do it. Sometimes it has to be done. All right, that time, once again, 11, a little after 11, but means it's time to talk some college football live before lock here at Stokastic, brought to you by No House Advantage. We're going to talk about them. We're going to talk about 13 games in 55 minutes. Who better to do that than Matt Gajewski, who joins me as he always does. Feeling good. Big sports day. A lot of big games on this slate.
Big sports day. I'm excited for it. Going to try to get 2 screens set up, watch some UFC, watch some college football. Luckily, our great games today are kind of spread out, so we don't have them all slotted in at one time, which I'm happy about. But I think the biggest thing today is it's a weather day. I think the first time in 9 weeks now that it's a weather day. I say 9. I'm including week 0 in this. So it's our 9th week of college football. But we'll see how the weather affects things. Did you have a take on that right away?
So I would totally agree with your overall take. Really hasn't played a major role in a slate this year. I don't have a blanket statement. It's always the age-old question. How many people are going to react? Does that cause overreaction? I think it's something that we can discuss as we get to some of these potentially windy games. I'm not overhauling it. Some of the totals have come down, and I think that that's kind of where you see some of those factors, really. I don't have really anything else to say where I'm saying I'm taking a game off the board or eliminating a game. Do you?
No, I don't really think you can. I'm going to run through a couple games just off the top here so we don't have to spend too much time once you start crossing off games, like you're going to run into a lot of problems here. Kansas, Baylor, 20-mile-per-hour wind, stronger gust. Cincinnati, SMU, 15 to 20-mile-an-hour wind, stronger gusts. Notre Dame, 15-mile-an-hour winds. Texas Tech, 20-mile-an-hour winds, stronger gusts. Oregon, rain. Oklahoma State, 25-mile-an-hour winds. Purdue, 15-mile-an-hour winds. Arizona State, 15-mile-an-hour winds. Like it's windy everywhere, man, guys. I don't know how much we can like cross teams off today because of that.
No, and we'll talk about some of the styles that can maybe thrive a little better. But overall, I think we're just going to have to deal with it. And we start things with Kansas, with Baylor in the Big 12, 58.5 point total. Baylor's a 10-point home favorite. Kansas has been an awesome story. Some of the story is lost its luster with Daniels down. They've lost a couple games here. Talk to me about the Jayhawks. They were putting up a ton of points early, but now they're running into stronger defenses.
Maybe a sneaky-ish game, 58 total, 10-point spread, money coming in on Baylor with the quarterback news there. Kind of hard to target Kansas on this slate with just great alternatives. Jason Bean is slotted into like 90% of the role that Jalen Daniels had. I still have questions on him talent-wise. We have a large sample of him starting, and he wasn't particularly good last year. This team is also very run-heavy, which he is a part of, 10 designed attempts in the last 2 games, but they also added Kai Thomas to the backfield. He was hurt earlier this year. He's a transfer. He kind of spelled Devin Neal, so we don't have that bell cow workload anymore. And then they don't throw a ton, so it's hard to play any of these receivers at these prices. I don't love Kansas today.
Yeah, you mentioned it. Peripherals don't really check out. Some of the personnel makes it a little difficult. We haven't really been targeting Kansas receivers, and I assume that doesn't change here.
Correct.
Other side, Baylor. We saw them in a wild game against West Virginia. Chapin, I mean, I don't know, 22 attempts for 326 yards. That seems slightly unsustainable. But what do you think the Bearcats, just the Bears, what do you think they do today?
He's been up and down and kind of riding with matchups. Played really well against weak secondaries and middling. He's kind of a game manager, middling against some of the better defenses that he's faced. Kansas is terrible in pass defense, 8.4 yards per attempt allowed. So theoretically on paper, this is a good spot, but we're dealing with 2 incredibly slow teams. Baylor's actually around average in pace, but Kansas is outside the top 100. 2 run heavy teams. And I don't really think their preference is to throw the ball with Chapin a lot. He's averaging 27 attempts per game. So going to need an outlier efficiency wise to get you to a ceiling score at his price, which is he's too expensive. And then the backfield, they've rendered this a timeshare. Richard Reese was at one time intriguing, but they're now involving Quaylon Jones. Squirrel Williams, when he's healthy, he's been banged up. And then the receivers have ebbed and flowed a lot. Part of that because they're really run heavy, which adds volatility inherently. But then Monterey Baldwin popped up for a big game 2 games ago, comes back with 3 targets. Gavin Holmes had 4 targets in the Monterey Baldwin game, and then he pops up for 8 targets in a massive game last week. So not only are you trying to predict which one it's going to be, but you also are trying to predict that it's not a running back because they've tried to just slam their backs into the back of the offensive line as their preferred strategy, falling back on this explosive pass game in the right matchups. So I don't have hardly any exposure to this game at all, really.
Yeah, so nothing in cash either, obviously.
No, not even, no.
I think that's really it for this game. I know you touched about thoughts on Neal real quick. I know you touched on him briefly.
Yeah, you'd be just a tournament play. They're using Kai Thomas more than they had been. He was hurt earlier in the year, so I don't think this is a real change. They're just getting a guy back from injury.
Syracuse, undefeated Syracuse, goes into Death Valley to take on Clemson. It's up to 14. Boy, do I need Clemson to just stomp them. 50-point total. Syracuse has been awesome. Your boy, Garrett Schrader, Sean Tucker, but they're not in the dome. They're going against a defensive front that's getting healthier by the second. Can you target Syracuse today, or are they just simply overmatched?
They really condense volume, essentially just to Schrader and Sean Tucker. They've played a little slower and run heavier than I thought. This is a Robert Anae offense. Virginia, he coordinated last year on the offensive side. But I'll start with Tucker because I think he's been the engine of the offense previously. He's being cannibalized by Schrader. He still is averaging 25.7 touches per game, over 100 rushing yards per game, and he's essentially their second leading receiver, narrowly behind Devon Cooper. And he's second on the team in targets behind Aronda Gadsden. So the role is awesome for him. But last week, Schrader, 12 designed attempts, Tucker 14. You're just not seeing the 30 touch upside we saw with Tucker a lot last year. I mean, we're kind of nitpicking here saying, all right, 25 touches, it's not the old Sean Tucker role. But at the same time, Braylon Allen's on this slate, Charbonnet's on this slate, and they're in the same price range, and they don't have as many touch questions, and they don't have as tough of matchups as Sean Tucker here. Like you said, this is the healthiest Clemson's defensive line has been all year. That puts Tucker in the GPP pivot for large field off of some of those main guys I just mentioned. Schrader, he's always going to have the outside chance of a GPP winning score because of his mobility. He already has 300 yards on the ground. We've seen ceilings from him, 12 design attempts in their last game. They're going to run him on the ground, and they're going to run him a lot as long as he's healthy. Just a tough matchup, and there's better overall quarterback plays, in my opinion, with some of the higher totals.
Dexter Pope, Tucker under 90.5 rushing yards. That's one I identified as well. We're going to talk about no house advantage in a little bit. I don't think he's going to have a lot of success today against that front. I really don't.
No, and his volume, I mean, they're going to trail in the game, so I think a lot of it comes in the pass game.
I really hope you're right. On the other side, Clemson, they've been good. They're certainly getting better. They've answered their tests. Uagalele's answered a lot of questions. Will Shipley's awesome. Antonio Williams is becoming the guy on the outside. What do you make? Are they stack viable? How do you go to Clemson today?
Probably not stack viable, but Uagalele, he has a similar role to Schrader. He's kind of like Schrader light in the run game. Tons of designed rush attempts for him this year, which is a change from last year. Here are just the last 4 games. Designed rush attempts, so this doesn't include scrambles, which would further elevate it. 9, 15, 8, and 13. Just ridiculous volume on the ground. And he's been efficient as a passer. He's averaging nearly 240 yards per game there on just 30 attempts. So Uagalele solid. I think this Syracuse defense is a bit of a paper tiger. They played at an incredibly easy level of competition to date, and they've shown cracks at times. Just the usage here, I think, is enough to warrant consideration. He's more of a cash play because I think there's kind of a capped ceiling on this game with the low total. But, I mean, he's about as safe as it gets at his price.
Anything else from this game?
Will Shipley, good GPP running back play. Kobe Pace, not going to suit up here. Sprained his ankle a couple weeks ago, still not back. That renders this a 2 backfield committee between Shipley and Maffa. So just less people that they're willing to trust out there. Shipley had 20 carries in their last game, 6 targets. He has that upside. And his year-long role is a little bit depressed because they previously were incorporating Pace. I'm probably not playing any of the receivers. This is the showdown slate, and you guys are going to find this a very, very clear build if you play that. But Antonio Williams, I would say, is a GPP pivot in that format.
Here we go. Iowa,
Here we
little
go.
29.5 point underdog at Ohio State with a 50-point total. Shows what we think of Iowa's offense. Is there any scenario in any format, unless you're playing low ball, which doesn't exist, that you would want to target Iowa?
Believe it or not, Ben, I have a little bit of Iowa players today. And
What? Sam Laporta?
has nothing to do with Iowa, has everything to do with their price. And if you're stacking Stroud, I think maybe we should just start with Ohio State and then come back to Iowa. Because so Stroud is 9,200. I think he's 100 cheaper than Bo Nix. He's clearly a desirable tournament play, especially when they're throwing the ball a lot. Their team total is still massive, even though the total in this game is low. They're implied for 40 points. So if you're stacking Stroud, you're going to have to spend up on Marvin Harrison. He's 7.6K. Emeka Ibuka, 6.9. If you want to throw the dart on Jackson Smith and Jigba, he's 7K. So if you double stack Stroud, you're forced into a build where you're required essentially to play a 3K receiver. And then, you know, if I'm debating between Nico Reganey, Sam Laporta, and then the other options like Jurasik or Goffney, I honestly think I'm just going to take the correlation. Like Sam Laporta had 16 targets in their last game. He's probably going to finish, maybe I would guess around 10 targets here, 7 or 8 catches, 28 yards. But I mean, if he gets 8 catches and just gets that PPR volume at 3.4K, and you still need your Ohio State stack to go off, that's where I see you could get to an Iowa guy. But that is the only way I'm doing it. And it's only a couple lineups because in my Ohio State stacks, I'm still getting more Jurasik. I'm still getting more Goffney and the other mid-price guys. But there's a touch of Nico Reganey and Sam Laporta, and I never envisioned myself saying that. I think it's the first time all year, right?
Yeah, and probably the last time. There's no scenario where you play Petrus or the backfield, though, right?
No, and there's no way where I play Laporta or Reganey as a one-off.
So it's confined to Stroud stacks?
Yes.
Okay. On the other side, you've already talked about Ohio State. They're going to do serious damage to this team. I want to ask you a little about Travion Henderson. and whatnot. Some of these guys, you never know with Ohio State because they really are cautious with all their players because they beat everyone by like 50. What do you anticipate here in terms of the backfield breakdown?
They haven't been the most forthright team this year. They've, if you're playing Jackson Smith and Jigba today, you definitely need to watch pregame, and I'll have my eye on this. You also need to be watching Henderson and Mayan Williams. They both have missed games in the last two. And essentially it's the same rhetoric every single week. Like, these guys are hopeful to play, but watch pregame. I expect them both to play today. That should render at a timeshare, kind of putting them in the expensive, explosive GPP category. They're about the same price as guys like Braylon Allen. So, I mean, they definitely don't project as well. But if one of them gets in the end zone 3 times on explosive plays, the upside is there. I probably wouldn't play them together, but one or the other. Otherwise, this is an offense you just want to take like stabs at because they're so explosive. And one guy I glossed over who I think is viable if you don't want to play a Reganey or a Laporta, their tight end Cade Stovers, the Stone Min. He's averaging 4.3 targets per game over their last 4. He's kind of another player that's catch the ball and fall down immediately, but he's the Stone minimum. So he makes for a pretty easy double stack if you're using Stroud.
It's going to be interesting. Yeah. Ohio State, they'll have tough games eventually. It's not going to be today. That's for sure. 30-point favorites. Cincinnati and SMU. We take a little turn. We're up to a 60.5-point total here. Question 1. Ben Bryant, the quarterback. What is the status of him? That determines a lot for Cincinnati. How do you go about that and talk about them as a whole?
He's in, which is great for the game environment. You're seeing the total rise rapidly. I made this myself at 61, bet it last Sunday. It crashed down to 58 because people, I think, expected Bryant to miss. And now I think it's going to get back up to that number. 2 really fast offenses. Quietly, Cincinnati's 45th in pace and SMU second. Cincinnati is throwing the ball incessantly too. Very different offense compared to when Ritter was there last year. And that's probably because Bryant's just a statue in the pocket. But him being active is huge for this offense. We still need to watch the status of Tyler Scott, who got banged up in their last game, an ankle, I believe. So he's a little more on the questionable side. If he plays, he's the wide receiver 1. If he doesn't, Trey Tucker is an awesome play. And let's just assume Scott's out for a second, that's going to elevate both Nick Mardner and Jaden Thompson into a larger role. They also get Will Pauling back today. He's going to be a rotational guy, but he's the Stoneman if you want to get there. My favorite cheap play is probably tight end Josh Wiley. He has 9 targets combined in the last 2 games. I think he's certainly usable in stacks of this team. So to sum up the pass catchers, it's Tucker and Wiley, and then, of course, Scott if he plays. The backfield's also really interesting here because SMU has been gashed on defense. They're allowing 5 yards per attempt to opposing rushers. You're going to see mostly Charles McClellan and Corey Kiner, who comes back from injury today. It's been McClellan slightly ahead of him, and McClellan's also the preferred pass catcher. He's in the GPP category. Interesting pivot off a guy like Casey Filkins, who we'll talk about much later, but he's going to be the chalk at this price.
No doubt SMU has really struggled stopping that run. So I get it. On their side, Mordecai, talk about running wild against Navy. Certainly a player that can do a lot. They play up tempo. What is the status of Rashee Rice on the SMU side? Talk to me about their personnel considering he's banged up.
I think he's going to play. So that report came out that he's week to week. And then, in my opinion, the best SMU beat came right back at that report and said, yeah, this isn't a new injury. Rashee Rice has been dealing with the toe all year. He's barely practiced all year. And then he comes out on game day and receives 13.5 targets per game. Essentially just saying, like, don't worry about this. He's going to play. He's been banged up the whole season. So I fully expect him to play here. Enormous role in the pass game. I think he's a completely fine play in this price range. Last week, they just essentially took their foot off the gas against Navy, allowed themselves to get backdoored. Didn't matter. They had a far more difficult matchup in this week's slate. So they just brought their guys out of the game. That's why he had 5 targets. But before that, target counts of 19, 13, and 18. He's averaging 127 yards per game. This guy's ridiculous.
Yeah, he's a player. There's no doubt. Do you look to him as a one-off?
He's warming up too. Literally as we speak, the push notification comes across my phone. Rashee Rice is warming up.
What are you okay with him as a one-off, or does it need to have Mordecai in there?
I'm okay with him as a one-off. I did play a few Mordecai stacks. He's the first man in those stacks.
Is there anything in that backfield? They're hurt. or is it confined to more stick to Mordecai, stick to Rice, or don't do anything?
This freaking SMU team. So that same beat reporter, I forget his name. I really should give him credit, but I just don't have it in front of me. He's awesome. He essentially came right out and said that Trey Siggers and Velton Gardner were practicing last week and then they just didn't play in the game, which says to me, all right, we've got Cincinnati on deck. Let's not worry about Navy. And they did not need to worry about Navy. They should form a timeshare if they're healthy. Just watch them pregame. We should get this coming through soon. Their beat reporter's already out there tweeting about Rashee Rice. So I'd expect the Siggers and Gardner news to come soon. They're still in a timeshare, so it's not a situation I want to target, but I will play a couple of these ancillary pass catchers. I have a lot of interest in Dylan Goffney, who's really come on as their wide receiver 2 in recent games. He was 70% route share, 60% last week. So he's pretty involved for this team. 4 targets, just you never really know what they're going to do outside of Rashee Rice. They also returned Jordan Curley, who played a fair amount and saw 5 targets. This kind of came at the expense of Moochie Dixon and Austin Upshaw. So I'm not really worried about Goffney at the Stoneman. I think he's fine down there. I'm playing him in a lot of those Ohio State stacks just to get the salary to play the studs.
Cash viable, or is that too thin for cash?
Goffney?
Yeah, at the flat, man.
I'm finding myself with a more balanced build where you don't necessarily need to go all the way down for cash. There's a couple running backs that are egregiously priced, and we'll get to them.
Before we get to them,
Filkins.
We're going to talk a little No House Advantage sponsoring this show. You've been doing content for them. I've been doing content for them. Different format over there. You can go over, check out what they've got going on, and they've got all the different sports, including college football. And what you're doing, you're predicting over under various props. They've got pick'em contests. They've got versus the house, all different things. You can bet up to 5-player props or individual matchups, everything that you want. And when you sign up over there, use the link below to get a first match deposit bonus of $50 with the promo code Stokastic. We've got tools that support it. I was over there. I mentioned that, shout out to Dexter Pope again, the under on Sean Tucker. I like the over on Uagalele. I like the over on Shipley. There's a million different props. And I know you put out a video as well. Really encourage people. There's a lot of overlay over there and a lot of opportunities to make some money at No House Advantage. Check it out. Let us know what you think. I know a lot of you have already signed up, but I do want to give them a shout out here, powering the show. And it is a really new, exciting format, one that you can build the bankroll with pretty easily. Now, in addition, also, we got a lot of people in here. I know it's a crazy Saturday. You probably got UFC on the other screen, and I respect that. But just the fact that you're here, if you want to support the show, hit that like button. Let's push it up a little bit as we get into the thick of this slate with UNLV and Notre Dame. I probably should have saved that line for a better game, but it's 26-point favorite for your boys. You disgraced yourself by going to the game and watching them lose in person last week. I assume you're not going back. 47.5-point total. If they don't win this game, I don't know what would happen. They're going to win. UNLV, our poor team, the wheels have fallen off and it's injury related, is it not?
Yeah, it sucks. They were maybe a top 3 all wagon team for us betting early in the year, but man, they've lost so many dudes. Don't think Doug Brumfeld plays. They lost their starting running back, Aiden Robinson, still down one of their top 2 receivers, Kyle Williams. He returned to practice, so we'll see if he plays. This team's implied for 10 points. Just X them out. Pretty easy.
Yeah, it's a tough spot. On the other side, Notre Dame, I mean, really disappointing. It looked like they were starting to find some rhythm with Pine and whatnot. Bad loss to Stanford. What do you think they do here?
Your first instinct is be like, I don't want to play any Notre Dame guys, but their implied team total is massive, 36.5 points. So immediately you want to target them, but they're going to just smash the run. Pine is inept. He's not even a capable game manager for them. So we know their game plan, but you can't really target any of these running backs with confidence because they use 3 of them and it's split right down the middle. Audric Estime, Chris Tyree, Logan Diggs. Last week, they had 8, 8, and 9 carries, and that's not abnormal for this team. So I think if you want to take a shot, it's probably just Diggs at the 4K price tag. He's the cheapest, but I don't feel great about that. Estime's been the most efficient, but they refuse to give him a larger workload. And maybe that's pass catching related. They kind of use Tyree in that role. So I don't have a lot of this backfield. It's really tough to get to. The one player I do have a fair amount of is Michael Mayer, 5K flat. He has a 35% target share, and they have to throw a little bit in this game at the very least. 5K is an appropriate price for him. I don't really see him as any spectacular value, and I don't really know what the upside is, but if you're playing cash or smaller tournaments, Michael Mayer has an excellent role.
Yeah, so you don't see yourself going to anything in the stack world, but maybe a one-off with one of those guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have much else to say. I didn't bet this game, did you?
I did not.
No. And we did have a question about that. We hit on all your bets. Let me tell you, friends, we will get in some bets on the show, but if you want all our bets, sign up for our Discord. The first week is 100% free. Your card is in there. My card is in there. Eitan, Eric, Greg, Laufey, Sean, Isaiah, the whole team. We've got so many good people dropping bets in there. I'm going to drop a link right now, actually, in chat. Use this. First week is free. Come on in. Check it out at least for a week and then say, wow, you're an idiot. I didn't like this. Well, then you leave for a week. That's fine. Or you stick around. It's no big deal. First week, 100% free. West Virginia, Texas Tech. This spread, I said to you before the show, it's been bouncing around. We caught it early. We've got good numbers on this. You've got a really good number on this on the Texas Tech side, 65.5. So this is a number we're getting serious now. But let's start with West Virginia. The JT Daniels experiment, in my opinion, hasn't gone great, and that might be putting it mildly. A wild game with Baylor. It's not all his fault. Maybe I should take that back. But talk to me about West Virginia. What do you expect from their offense in this spot?
I think they're going to continue throwing the ball. They've been up and down, and they've been in a couple shootouts. Saw that against Baylor last week, to your point. But 52% pass rate. Both these teams are fast. Texas Tech has quietly played good defense, but it's a weird game to look at because the wind is going to be a role for two teams that pass incessantly. JT Daniels is not playable because he can't stop taking sacks and he doesn't run otherwise. So his price is unbelievably high. You're not playing him. The backfield is a three-way timeshare with CJ Donaldson coming back. He was trending towards their feature back before he went down, but he took a nasty hit, had to be stretchered off. I don't know if Mathis or Johnson come in and spell him today, so not playing them. The pass catchers are intriguing. They play in voluminous roles. It's basically Bryce Ford Wheaton and Caden Prather. Sam James has taken a backseat recently. Prather's the guy who's really priced to play here. 9.8 targets per game over the last 4. I'm fine playing him as a one-off for this offense, and I do have some of that.
Anything, you mentioned JT Daniels can't stay on his feet, taking a lot of sacks. What do you think about the running game? If it's like crazy windy, could these teams really shift there and start like Western Kentucky? Not to go on a tangent. No, you didn't watch the game. Western Kentucky last night basically only ran the ball. How shady is that? Like,
I saw the box score.
Yeah, very disturbing on multiple fronts. Do you think that could happen here? Maybe.
It's 20-mile-an-hour winds. I would be surprised, but you never know. They've had some success running the ball, so it's at least worth considering. If that's the approach you want to take, I would play Donaldson, but it's still a three-way committee. So even if they do increase their run rate, it's going to be hard for one of these guys to hit a ceiling without multiple scores.
We did have a quick question. Shout out to Rick from chat. Prather in this game or Zay Flowers from BC?
Zay Flowers.
Yeah, I would agree.
He's a wagon.
Yeah, and Wake Forest, they're going to score, but they'll let BC get some. On the other side, Texas Tech, they've got unlimited amounts of QBs, and it looks like it's Burhan Morton. That's the guy, is that not?
So here's the reports. I think Texas Tech playing a little bit of gamesmanship. Tyler Show's questionable. They say he will get snaps if he's active. I don't really buy it, but I could be wrong. I'm wrong all the time. So take that for what it's worth. Then you had another report saying all 3 quarterbacks could see the field. Oh. That's not really that surprising to me. In their most recent game, both quarterbacks saw the field. Donovan Smith saw the field in wide receiver. He didn't play quarterback. And then there was another report from a well-respected Texas Tech beat that Baron Morton is taking most of the first team reps in practice this week. I mean, he's their best player on offense. He's a highly recruited 4-star freshman who had an amazing showing in his first game. I think it's kind of one of those situations where if he plays well, he doesn't come off the field. And if you're playing him in tournaments, that's what you're looking for anyway. If he has a middling performance, you're probably losing. So what does it matter if he gets benched outside of min cash equity?
Do you worry about, like, he's had some time to get healthy? You're not worried about injury, right?
Yeah, it doesn't seem like he's missing any practice time. So no.
Okay. What do you do with him? He can move a little bit, but I assume you'd look to Bryce or I don't know. Who would you look to for a possible connection?
Yeah, he does move well, to your point. 58 rushing yards, most of that coming in that game. Last thing I'll say about him, just quickly, he projects extremely well if you give him 100% of the snaps, like extremely well, second best value among quarterbacks. But you talked about the volatility here. If he's in any sort of timeshare, that's going to be hurt. So I wouldn't play him in cash. I probably am still going to, I'm using him a fair amount in tournaments, but just know that you could take a score and be really frustrated with your day if other quarterbacks come in. With that said, if you're willing to take the risk, he's got an awesome projection, and this offense is just tailor-made for DFS success. As far as stacking him, watch his pass catchers. Still looking for information on Miles Price and JJ Sparkman. Sparkman, he only has 15 targets this year. He's a rotational guy, but Miles Price is their wide receiver 1. His status is highly impactful for everybody else. I have some interest in Price, but he's a bit expensive. But what I really want to do, and I'm never rooting for injury, but if Miles Price is out, you're getting a very nice price tag on Jaron Bradley, who leads their team in targets and receiving yards this year. He's 4.5K. He's my favorite to stack. Trey Cleveland second. He's just a bit more expensive, but he's coming off a monstrous 16 target game. Xavier White would be the wide receiver 3 if these two guys miss. If either returns, Trey Cleveland and Xavier White probably go back into more of a timeshare role. Bradley's routes will also be cut too, but he would still be the guy I'm most comfortable with.
Anything in the backfield?
They did something weird last week. So Roderick Thompson had 17 carries and 3 targets. And then Taj Brooks only had 4. I scoured the internet for injury news. I didn't catch this game last week because I was at Notre Dame, but I did not see any injury news. This is a 1-game sample where they just gave the whole workload to Sir Roderick. They haven't done this once this season outside of that game, so I'm hesitant to buy into it, but man, he's GPP viable if they're going to give him that workload.
Couple questions here before we move to the next game. We got Nix and Reese or Spencer Sanders and Braylon Allen.
Who's Nixon? I need first
names.
No,
Nix. Bo Nix. I'm sorry.
I was going to say Nixon, the backup Oklahoma State running back. Okay, say it again, Ben. Sorry.
Bo Nix and Reese, the running back from Baylor, or Spencer Sanders and Braylon Allen.
I'd go the Sanders side.
So would I. You've talked about a couple guys in the straight 3K range. Do you have one that stands out amongst the rest?
My favorite down there is Jurasic from Stanford.
And then last one, wide receiver, 4,900 or less on DraftKings.
4,900 or less?
Yeah.
I think the guy I have the most of down there is going to be...
There's some names.
Higgins, I believe. Elijah Higgins from Stanford.
44. Yeah.
Yeah, I think he's the guy I have the most of. That's a weird price range. Like the 500 above, that's hard to find someone with a decent projection.
LSU and Ole Miss, a fascinating game. The spread tells the tale. LSU's a 1.5 point favorite against the unbeaten Ole Miss team, 64.5 point total. Let's start with Mississippi. Jackson Dart, Lane Kiffin, who you can't roster, and the pass catchers, the backs, they want to run it. How do you attack this team, and do you think they can have success against LSU?
I do. The total's massive. I think this is maybe the sneakiest shootout of the day, with people gravitating to other games. It also doesn't have weather, so if you're playing that angle, Dart is not expensive. He's 6,700. He's elite with his mobility. Like, he has more rushing yards than like Uagalele and DTR and some of these guys in the year, very quietly too. This team is 3rd in pace. They're running 65% of the time. And here's Dart's designed attempts: 12, 9, 1 was in a blowout. Don't look at the 1. And then 16. He has 12 plus rushing attempts designed in 2 of the last 4 games and 9 in another one. Like, he's got a phenomenal role on the ground. He's playable without even really considering the passing. He's been middling. He's semi-efficient. Completion percentage isn't great, but if I trust any quarterback, or excuse me, any play caller to scheme their quarterback into some advantageous looks, it is Lane Kiffin. I have a lot of interest in Dart today.
When you look at Dart, though, I just want to take it a step further, because you mentioned some of that. Do you see running him possibly alone?
Yeah, without a doubt, you can certainly do that.
What does that do to the backfield? Does it render him useless, or can they coexist? It's just a very heavy rushing attack.
For sure. They're priced up now. So we were playing a lot of Judkins early in the year when he was like, I mean, he was 3K one week, which was unbelievable. But then they've slowly been raising him up to 6,700 now. These guys are, I view them almost the same as the Ohio State backs. Explosive backs in a rush-heavy timeshare with upside when they're playing in positive game scripts. So we can see this kind of 1-for-1 when they're killing teams like last week. I mean, they didn't kill their opponent. That was a very close game, but it's, I guess I should say, competitive games where they need to ride them for the whole time. Judkins 24 attempts, Evans 21. But then if they're ever killing a team or if they're down, those attempts plummet. So they're in that like explosive running back with upside category, slightly projected below a couple guys in their range, but certainly viable in tournaments.
On the other side, Jaden Daniels, he was I got caught in the Florida trap. That was on me last week. Stupid. But he was good. And I know you have talked about some of his potential overs on like No House Advantage, Prize Picks type sites. Him, Butte, Williams in the backfield. What are we thinking about for LSU? They are a slight favorite.
Yeah, well, I'll talk LSU quick, and then I want to circle back to Cincinnati. We got some news there. For LSU, Jaden Daniels is awesome. Number one value quarterback on the slate. Incredible mobility. Incredible. He leads the team in rushing, 400 rushing yards on the year, and he's been good as a passer. Not the most efficient, but this offense has propelled him to success multiple ways, which I love for a floor ceiling combo for a quarterback that's now playing in an elite total, second best total on the board. So Daniels right away, he's playable naked. If you want, you can stack him to his top two pass catchers, Malik Neighbors and Kayshon Boutte, are both 5.8K and 5.3. Very easy to stack there. And then you also have a outside consideration at tight end, Mason Taylor to Stone Min. I want to play a lot of this Jaden Daniels. I'm going to play him naked. I'm going to play him in stacks. He's excellent. The backfield's much harder to get to because Armani Goodwin's returning from injury, rendering it a three-way committee. So it's Daniels with Boutte and Neighbors mostly, but this is an awesome play.
So no Josh Williams at the flat min?
No, he did in the beginning, but now you're rendering this a three-way timeshare instead of two.
Any scenario where you play Dart and Daniels together?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Okay.
And I think you could play them both naked if you want.
Interesting. That's a very interesting tournament scenario. I look at that, and we're going to talk about that again in this next game right now with UCLA.
One thing, a couple things.
Cincinnati, go ahead.
Yeah, Tyler Scott out. He's in a boot. So Trey Tucker, sick play, and Mardner, Thompson, playable as well. Also, Siggers out, Gardner in for SMU.
Does that do anything for you?
Not a ton. I think it's still a timeshare.
Yeah, I tend to agree. UCLA and Oregon, college game day is there. The Ducks, 6.5 point favorite, 71 point total. DTR has answered the call. UCLA has answered the call so far this year. They've just been awesome. Charbonnet, I mean, you got targets. How do you go about getting exposure, and where do you want to get overweight with UCLA today?
Charbonnet for sure. He has a monstrous workload that's been depressed by injury in a couple cupcake matchups. So 19.8 touches per game. He's going to be way over that in a competitive game here. Also, Oregon, outside of the Georgia game, has not necessarily played the toughest competition. Their yards per attempt allowed is decent in both the pass and the run. They rank outside the top 100 in PFF's run defense. So I don't envision this being a particularly difficult matchup for Charbonnet either. He also has an electric pass game role. He's a rock solid play. DTR is awesome too. We've seen his role kind of a little bit below where he was last year. He was banged up to start the year, so they took their foot off the gas with him in a couple games. He should have more rushing output in this game compared to his seasonal averages. Awesome as a passer too. By far the most efficient passing season of his career. Over 250 yards on just 27.5 attempts. UCLA plays hyper speed. This is the Chip Kelly offense. They're passing more than last year, which kind of puts a couple pass catchers into play for stacks. Jake Bobo's the wide receiver 1. He's a bit expensive for my liking. I'd rather play an Ohio State receiver or like find the salary for Rashee Rice, but he's playable if you want to stack. I have interest in Cam Brown at 3.9K. He's running more routes than Casimir Allen at this point, about 70% for Brown, and Casimir was around 45% last week. Targets don't reflect that, so I think there's still some potential leverage in this situation. They just rotated Allen with Logan Loya, which is not good for DFS.
It's certainly a great game environment. You mentioned some of these guys. On the other side, $9,300 Bo Nix. That is a premium tag. What does that do in terms of being able to get him in your lineups? And if you do, how do you go about kind of constructing them?
Bo Nix has had an awesome season. Got to give him credit where it's due. He is hard to play, though. He's 100 more than CJ Stroud. I'd rather play Stroud, but I have some stacks of this game with Nix. Really good mobility, 331 yards, great passing numbers. They're essentially the same as DTR's, but he has more volume. I'm a little worried about price. That's the only thing here. Oregon's harder to target because of opportunity cost, and that starts with Nix. Also, you have Troy Franklin at 7K. He's only averaging 5.7 targets per game. Chase Cota, their wide receiver 2, is a little more palatable, but 4.7 targets per game, 46 yards. That's not great. And then they rotate the hell out of the rest of their receivers. They rotate the hell out of their running backs. I don't know who you play with confidence from this Oregon team outside of just Nick's naked. And again, I think that comes with a lot of opportunity costs when you could play Dart for like 2.5 less K or Jaden Daniels for a couple thousand less. Name your player. There's better price adjusted plays than Nick's.
Yeah, it's a weird situation because you want access to that team total, but the pricing really does make it difficult here. And you mentioned how many guys they use I mean, seriously, how many backs do they have? It's absurd.
5. Cardwell's hurt right now, though, so it's 4, maybe 3.5 if they're not giving Sean Dollars work, but it's not pretty.
Texas and Oklahoma State, 6-point favorite for the Longhorns. Quinn Ewers and co. going to Stillwater. It's a weird spread. We'll talk about why. But you got Bijan, you got Ewers, you got the weapons on the outside. What are you doing with Texas?
They're tough to evaluate because of the weather. This appears to be one of the most affected games. And the way the stadium is oriented there, it's going to be cross-field winds, which is kind of rough. You don't have the wind at your back at any time. So Card was already volatile. Like, he's incredibly efficient, but he still has yet to put up that like eruption game that puts him on the DFS map. So his price is affordable. And initially during the week, I thought I would end up playing a lot of Ewers. I might have said Card before. Sorry if I did.
Yeah, I was gonna say, God, tell me, is Ewers
I was
out?
looking.
No.
I was looking at Card's name on my sheet. He's right above Ewers. Sorry, I'm talking about Ewers. Okay. Ewers is incredibly efficient, but we've yet to see that big blow up game. So does it come in a win spot? I have enough questions and there's enough good alternatives where I don't know if you need to take this risk. I am still playing some of the pass catchers, particularly Jatavian Sanders. Exact same target volume as Jordan Whittington, only narrowly behind him in terms of yardage. He's really cheap. Just a little worried about the win, but I don't think playing the tight end position, it's as much of a worry. Xavier Worthy, I think, is playable at his price, but he's more of a tournament option. I'd rather now play Tucker from Cincinnati over him straight up.
What about Bijan?
Bijan's sick. The only problem with Bijan, he's 9.4K, and you're getting better touches with Braylon, who's cheaper, Charbonnet, who's cheaper, and if not better, the same. Casey Filkins, you're going to save 4K if you go down and play him. He has this. Casey Filkins is a better workload than Bijan. He's not as talented, clearly, but I mean, for DFS purposes, if you're getting similar production at 4K cheaper, you're probably going to take that. The only thing you're doing with Bijan is if you find yourself with the salary, then play him for sure. The last thing I'll say is these really expensive backs come in overowned every week. People love smashing the button on Mo Ibrahim, even though you can find cheaper touches.
Anything else from Texas? I know you mentioned Worthy.
No.
Sanders is the pay down.
Yeah, nothing here.
Oklahoma State. Spencer Sanders. I mean, he's obviously, he may be out there, but he doesn't seem 100%. It was pretty evident. I watched the TCU game. What a wild game. What does that do? The line kind of says it all to me. Oklahoma State is hurting. How do we exploit that, or do we buy in and maybe buy low on them?
You're not going to know anything about his health. Gundy refuses to talk about it. So I don't know. You play him in GPPs if you want. He's great if he's fully healthy. Really efficient passer this year, by far the best of his career. Really great runner. He still was good running last week. The injury is to his throwing shoulder. So I think he's kind of a guy you could take a stab on. But again, like Ewers, the weather exacerbates this injury further. So he's another player where if you're just playing smaller fields, I don't think you need to take the risk. There's a lot of really good alternatives, but he has a clear ceiling, which keeps him in play. I'm a little worried about his pass catchers too. They all had middling games last week for the most part because of this injury. So Braden Johnson's a little too expensive for me. Bryson Green runs a ton of routes, but 4.7 targets per game. I just think we could do better with these guys. And lastly, Dominique Richardson has a bell cow role, but they've struggled to run the ball this year. So it's been largely inefficient, 72 yards on the ground. As a pass catcher, he's averaging 35 yards. This is on 21.2 touches. So it's really good volume. But again, just probably pay down for Filkins or something.
Couple questions. We got a couple games left. We'll be fine, though. Cam Brown or Jordan Watkins?
Watkins.
Is it a priority to fit in Trey Tucker into Mordecai and Rice stacks now that Tyler Scott is out?
Not necessarily. You can play McClellan, but he's a sick play in those builds. I'm trying to finesse things a little bit on my end to get more of him right now.
Last spot, $6,100 on DraftKings for a flex. Is it Worthy? Is it someone else? Is it McClellan from Cincy?
Filkins.
Super chat. Appreciate this from Vince. 2 best flex plays under 5,700. So you've got Filkins and one more.
Is Spears 5,700, I believe. C58.
Spears is 57. Filkins is 58.
Oh, Spears number 1 then. Number 2, I don't know. I don't have salary right in front of me.
You got Butte there. You got Antonio Williams.
Neighbors
there.
Below that price, I think. C58.
58. Man, find $100, my friend. This is a killer. I like these guys at 58 a lot more. Sam James.
Get Filkins.
And I'm gonna throw Sam James's name in there.
Yeah, he's fine.
He's fine.
Tyjae Spears is by far the best one.
Yes, I would agree with that. All right. Flowers are worthy. It would be Flowers for me.
Flowers.
BC. Let's talk about Flowers. 20.5 point dogs. Wake Forest 16.5 point total. With BC, we know we like Flowers. Do we like anything else?
No, we like Flowers, and Flowers is a smash play. Everyone else on this team sucks.
Cash viable.
Yep.
Wake Forest. You've got Hartman. First off, at nearly 9,000. How much of a priority is it him over guys like Stroud, Nix? Where does he fall in that QB hierarchy?
Not a priority for me. He's a GPP play with upside if Boston College keeps this closer than we expect, which is a major question. Wake Forest just has been pounding the rock if they're leading in games. They had a 35% pass rate in their last game. They just have, and the previous game to that, they ran Justice Elson 18 times and Turner 20. Like they've just shown a complete willingness to, I don't know, game manage their way through these spots when they're winning, which is really concerning to me for his price.
Anything for Wake Forest, the backfield, the pass catchers, what do you look to do there? They are a massive favorite.
Massive favorite, and they're rotating guys this year. Last year, you could count on A.T. Perry and Shakari Roberson to handle every target. This year, only A.T. Perry has a consistent role. Donovan Green, Jamal Banks, Keyshawn Williams, and Taylor Moore are all ping-ponging between 40 and 60% of the routes, rarely eclipsing it. None of them average more than 4.5 targets per game. I'm not playing any of them outside of Perry, and I have very little Perry as well.
So that makes Wake Forest, despite having a massive team total, not the easiest to get to?
They're really not, because there's better alternatives at every price. The running backs are priced up in a range where I'm not playing Ellison. I'd rather play Filkins. I'd rather play Stroud if I'm paying up for a quarterback. Otherwise, like Daniels, Charbonnet, Dart, these guys are way better price-adjusted plays than Hartman.
Anything else from this spot?
I don't think so.
Okay. A couple more rapid fire for you. We got a lot of questions today. UCLA receivers, Ezeke or Cam Brown?
Cam Brown.
Best play. We keep getting this $4,700 or less. I feel like we've seen that.
Higgins.
Yeah, there you go. Good. I can't remember the pricing. Favorite wide receiver, 5,900 or less, not named Flowers. We were just in this range.
Yeah, I don't know. This range sucks.
What about Neighbors?
Probably Prather.
Okay, that's fair. John, thoughts on Rise Plumlee? He's going to run wild against East Carolina. He's not on this slate, but
on FanDuel, he projects really well.
Really well, and he should. Purdue and Wisconsin, 51.5 point total. Purdue's a slight dog. I know you like him in the game. Do you worry about the wind specifically affecting O'Connell?
Yes, but I worry more about game environment because the total's 50 points, and he was a smash underplay for us on Prize Picks. And I haven't projected below 300 yards passing. If he doesn't hit 300 yards passing, he's busting in your lineups because he's going to take like 7 sacks. No matter who he plays, they're facing FIU. O'Connell's on the ground with negative 30 rushing yards. Just a weekly occurrence for him.
So what about Charlie Jones on the outside?
He's playable because his volume is so good. He's like the Rashee Rice of Purdue.
You're not going to play the backfield?
No.
So with Purdue, just to sum it up before we go to the other side, I mean, is it just those guys or are there more guys to talk about?
You could maybe get to a GPP Payne Durham, but I don't love it. I think there's better options.
On the other side, I mean, is it serious to consider Graham Mertz? It would feel like with all the quarterbacks that it wouldn't be viable.
No, you'd have to pay me to play Graham Mertz.
Yeah, he's in the Petrus bucket. What about Braylon Allen? Clearly is playable. We know that, but Is he cash viable? Is he a priority? How do you think that he fits in amongst all the running backs today?
I personally think he's the best running back play on the entire slate. He's without Ches Malusi, who's out again. He just saw 29 carries, and then let's see his targets. He was down 4 targets in their last game. So Ches had kind of played that role. So he doesn't have great target volume on the year, but if he sees 33 touches in this matchup, like he was already efficient. He's awesome. If he sees 34 touches, 33 touches again, he's going to break the slate.
But that's really the only playable guy.
I was getting a little Skylar Bell. I just X'd him out. I think that's because Wisconsin's pass rate's artificially high at this point in the year, 43%. They prefer to be around 33%.
Appreciate the super chat from Chris Albers. Best flex play under $5,200.
That range is so bad.
Yeah, it's pretty rough. You've got Mayer there.
It's Mayer.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd go with Mayer. Yeah, that's honestly the answer. So, yeah, I think Trey Tucker could be good. We're going to get to Valladay in a second. Memphis and Tulane. Interesting game. Memphis is a touchdown dog, 55.5 point total. You know these teams pretty well. I've seen Memphis just a little bit with Hennigan and co. Is he in play? And how do you think they attack?
He's in play a little bit. I don't want to play any of this team, though. Tulane's defense is awesome. They rotate 3 running backs. Brandon Thomas might be out. That's still pretty unusable. And they just went full rotation at receiver last week. Essentially, only Javon Ivory played a consistent role. Everybody else, Eddie Lewis, Rogers, they went into full rotation with Rock Taylor, Joe Skates, Colby Drake. This team's unplayable.
Tulane, you mentioned they're an awesome team. What do you do, though? Do they translate kind of to DFS, or are they just an awesome team?
Pratt runs a lot, so he's solid. I think you can play him for sure. And then Spears is seeing an ascending workload. They previously had him in a timeshare. They've kind of taken the reins off of Spears and given him full run, which makes him a really good play. He's playable, I think, in tournaments as a pivot off Filkins. I think you can use them together. He's borderline cash viable. He's just really good.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt his name has come up a lot today. I get it. Is it anything else like in terms of stackability or whatnot with this team, or is it just kind of confining to the options that pop up?
Exactly. They run a rotation at receiver that's very hard to navigate.
Interesting. Jalen Daniels warming up. We'll have to see. He could just be warming up. We got Butte and Filkins versus McClelland and Mayer for Notre Dame.
Butte Filkins
for me too. Valladay, Braylon Allen, Filkins, and Charbonnet. How would you rank them, man? That's tough.
Braylon. Wait, can you say it again?
It's Valladay, Allen, Filkins, and Charbonnet. I would also have Allen 1 for what it's worth.
Filkins 1 because of price. Allen 2. Bijan was in there?
No, Charbonnet and Valladay.
Oh, Charbonnet 3, Valladay 4.
I'd have the same, except I'd have Allen 1, Filkins 2, but very close. All right, let's get to the last game. We'll talk a little bit on the way out, and then we'll call it a day. I will say very quick, I know a lot of you were asking about betting things. I do want to throw this in there very quick. It's worth it to hear this. BetMGM has their no-brainer offer, and it's bet 10 on any NHL money line when you deposit using the link below, and they give you $200 once a team scores. So you don't need to know anything about hockey. It would actually be easier if you didn't. Just pick a random team and get your $200 in free bets when you click that link. It's right in the description of this video. Take 2 minutes and do it. Get a couple extra $100 and then bet it on college football. That's what I would do. Arizona State and Stanford. God, I hate these teams. I wish this game wasn't on the slate. Emory Jones, Valladay. Talk to me about the Sun Devils.
This one's just Valladay or pass because they're so run heavy. So it's pretty easy to evaluate. They're not using Emory Jones as a rusher. He has 5 design rush attempts over the last 4 games. He's unplayable with that workload.
On Stanford, you saw them in person take down Notre Dame. What did they do and what can they do here?
They gave Casey Filkins 39 touches, and now they're a home favorite, I think, for the first time all season. Unbelievable spot for Filkins.
Just volume gets him there.
Yeah, he's actually averaging like 3 yards per carry, but it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
The last thing I'll say is they lost their number 1 receiver. So that's kind of going to also open up a lot of value with Higgins as their new wide receiver 1. You're looking at Rasa, their tight end at the Stoneman with an elevated role. John Humphrey should be the new wide receiver 3. These guys are going to pop in optimals because they're so cheap.
No doubt about it. I mean, the volume is going to get you there. It's a buy situation on them, even though they're not a high prolific team. Real quick, if you have a 30-second spiel, we had a question from friend of the show, News God, about the Miami and Duke game. Duke is a wild team with Leonard and co. Is anything stand out there before we bounce on out?
I like Miami in the game. They played really well last week and should have won by a lot more, honestly, but did not come to fruition. They got backdoored by Virginia Tech, but they're the better team here. I think they cover the spread and win this game.
Couple on the way out. I'm going to answer one because the answer is always Flowers here in this slate. Allen or A.T. Perry?
Allen.
Yeah, I think it's Allen too. A.T. Perry's got some upside, no doubt, but Allen's workload's so secure. Spears or Valladay?
Valladay.
Ooh, interesting on the way out from Alex Weaver. Do you have any lineups where you think 4 running backs is okay?
No.
Not on this slate? Too many good QBs?
Personally, I think so.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. With that, man, we're doing Jalen out. If Daniels plays, that doesn't really change anything for you, right?
No,
I don't think that matters either. Where are we here? Thoughts on Valladay? We talked about them. When are they going to stop counting sacks against QBs? Never, but that would be a change.
Yeah, you'll have to go talk to the people that make these. I mean, that's college football decides that, not us.
No, they don't. Any final thoughts? We made a very good time here. Before we bounce on out, any final words for the people before we call it a day? We have shows all day as usual here at the Stokastic Network. You guys know the drill, but final parting words from the man himself.
Yeah, good luck, everybody. I'm super excited for the day. Hope you guys have an awesome one yourselves. Otherwise, thank you for being here as always and allowing Ben and I to do what we love. I'm a huge college football fan, love breaking it down in DFS. It's been a blast doing it all year, and hopefully we have a profitable day. Good luck to you all.
Well said. It's been awesome for me, for Matt, for Mike behind the glass. Thank you guys. Again, I want to say thanks to No House Advantage and BetMGM. Both of them do a great job with here and at OddsShopper. Go to OddsShopper YouTube if you want our betting picks and the Discord. We're going to bounce on out, friends. If you have any other questions, Matt_Gajewski at JazzRazDFS. It's on the screen. Good luck. Enjoy all the games and all the sports, and come back next week. Same time, same place.